Welcome to the Vegas Benchwarmer podcast. I'm Eric, he hate me 702. This is
Geremy with a G.
And down below we got a guest. I'm gonna let him go ahead and introduce yourself. Go ahead and do it, boss.
What's going on? My name is Chaka Cummings. I have a podcast, Effin' Sports. The podcast for two teachers, great sports, biggest issues. You can find me on Twitter at Chaka Cummings, at CHAKACUMMINGS. And then the podcast Twitter is at Effin' Sports 2.
All right. Make sure you guys hit him up, follow him. Make sure you like, subscribe on this view. Geremy, do you have YouTube pulled up?
Yeah.
Okay, are you going to look at the chat?
Yeah, I'll keep looking at that.
Oh, I need to change the damn name. Okay, so as of right now, we're going to talk about player empowerment movement. Basically, what does that mean to you, Geremy?
I think for me, it's just players trying to take control of their career, of their future, of pretty much every aspect of the game that they can.
Okay. That's it?
Yeah.
See, he doesn't like to talk. Go ahead, Chaka. Go ahead and tell us. What do you think about it?
So for me, player empowerment, it gets to what Geremy said. It is about control. When I think about player empowerment, though, I really think that it's players essentially trying to shift what has been unbalanced throughout the history of sport. This idea of owner, right? The fact that someone can own, right? So now when you're in a dynamic where there's someone who owns, okay, what level of power are you saying that I can have? And it's only now that the salaries have become exorbitant and that the money is crazy that players can now look at themselves as assets that they control. Like, I control me. I am my brand, right? And that's professional sports. That's also collegiate sports. Like, if you look at Black Lives Matter, the movements over the summer, there's player empowerment in college sports just like there is in professional sports. Just using that control, using that platform that you have.
I completely agree with both of you guys. I think it's, to me, it's more or less like it's players taking control, and it's not every player. It's the players that have the ability to take control, and it's, in my opinion, it's happened just because of like what you were saying, the owners, which now they're calling them governors in some sports. Me and you are gonna fight. They had control over the entire how much they paid them, how long of the contracts they were. You need to make money this way. Now that players have an outside source of income besides just the sport that they're playing, whether, like you were saying, with the brand, you see players have money on the table all the time. Come here. All the time due to they can make that money off the court. And I think with the way that superstars and certain players have been allowed, have the money earnings off the court, it is basically like, look, screw what you guys said. We've seen tons of people, Dominique Wilkins, Dan Marino, that literally are trash nowadays. They are talked shit about because of the fact that they did not win the Ultimate Championship. John Stockton. We're taking that out of your hands. It's not, you can't build us a team. Okay, that's fine. We're going to go and make our team. And it's the same thing that all of us do outside of sports. Like, if you're in a job and you're not making the money you're supposed to make, please tell me you're not going to get up and leave. You will get up and leave in a heartbeat. If you don't like your boss or the people that you work with, you will get up and leave in a heartbeat, which to me, they're just basically becoming us. They have more control of their career where they have none before. Like, up until, year 6 in the NFL, you don't control anything on your career. In the NBA, you don't control your career up until year 7 or 8 after your second contract. I'm not sure on baseball, and the WNBA is a little different. I don't pay attention to hockey. But that's what it is to me. It's just players completely taking control or taking back how they've been fucked in years before and controlling the narrative about their career.
So it's about leverage, right? So like you said, when we think about like us as kind of, run-of-the-mill folks, I'm a teacher, right, by trade. Like, the leverage points that I have are when folks recognize how good a teacher I am, right? And so at the end of the year, when I go to negotiate my contract and you want to talk about a 3% raise, and I say, listen, I'm looking more for a 5% raise, that's where my leverage comes in. And we all, in our day-to-day, try to take advantage of those different leverage points. I mean, think about, like, your day-to-day life. You might go into a store and say, listen, I'll buy these jeans if you don't charge me the tax.
True.
Because you are trying to take advantage of that leverage. So now why wouldn't I take that same point and extrapolate that? And we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. When we're talking about the fact that if I'm James Harden, I make as much money from Adidas as I make from you guys in Houston.
Yep.
Right? If I'm LeBron, you can forget LeBron James, right? Like, that level of superstardom, like, he's going to be a billionaire.
Yes.
There is nothing an NBA team can tell him. He will own one of these teams one day. So there's nothing anyone can tell that man, right? So he's just taking advantage of leverage. And not every person has equal opportunities to take advantage of leverage. So like you talked about, the superstar players do.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that Kyle Kuzma doesn't have the same leverage as Anthony Davis.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
And even if you look at a guy like DeMarcus Cousins, when DeMarcus Cousins was in Sacramento, he was able to take advantage of leverage, and then he got injured.
And then they traded him.
A lot of different perspectives end up shifting that leverage, man. There's a lot of different things that can happen.
Geremy, you got anything? So I'm glad you said that, because of the fact that not only is it just a leverage.
Y'all went on to NBA, and that's where you.
We're talking about everything, but it's not. It's not only.
Y'all went this way.
It's not only the leverage. It's like the leverage was a very good point, because of the fact that you bring up Kyle Kuzma. Kyle Kuzma has no leverage like Anthony Davis. But on the other end, the owners or governors, whatever they're being called now, have all of the leverage. And Kyle Kuzma literally last season, for half the season, was hanging in the balance, not knowing if he was going to get traded. He didn't know if he was getting traded. He didn't know if he was going to go to another team, if he'd end up in New Orleans, Toronto, and nobody said anything about that. Like, Draymond Green made a perfect point where Andre Drummond set out last night's game. We saw Harrison Barnes get pulled in the middle of the game. Nobody says shit about that. Nobody goes, oh, the players, Minka Fitzpatrick got traded from the Dolphins to Pittsburgh. I'm sorry. I don't want to go live in Pittsburgh. I would rather go stay and play in Miami. Fuck being in Pittsburgh. Granted, it may give me a better chance to win, but I had no control over that. Nobody's bitching. Nobody's sitting up there going, oh my God, that we feel bad for the players that Minka had to leave Miami and go all the way to Pittsburgh. What's the guy from the Jacksonville that got traded from Jacksonville to Minnesota and then to Baltimore this year? He's a defensive end. Like, they have...
Oh, that Giannis Ngakoue?
There we go. Yeah, that guy. So when you're 100% right when you say leverage. Like, certain players have leverage, and we'd be crazy not to think that they're going to use it when it involves millions of dollars, when we do it like he said, in our everyday life. You go to the store, go to a car dealership. Let's see how that works. I used to sell cars. I bought cars. You were all about anything you finance, you were all about getting leverage for. But yet, these players are basically getting paid millions of dollars for a very, very limited time. Like, yeah, LeBron James has been playing 18 seasons. There's a reason why we marvel over that. Because not everybody is that talented to keep it at that long. Tom Brady is 43 fucking years old and just won a Super Bowl. And basically just said, he did a LeBron James in the NFL, said, no, Patriots, I'm done with y'all. I'm going to go pick my team, and then we're going to go win. When you have that kind of leverage that the players are having now, I just think it's amazing. I think it's awesome that they're controlling their careers compared to what it was like Michael Jordan or Scottie Pippen in The Last Dance, where both of them went in trades and they were on 10 years contracts and grossly underpaid. How often is it that a NFL team cuts you after you sign a contract? We all know with NFL teams it's guaranteed money. You sign a 5-year, $125 million contract and it has $35 million guaranteed. You only getting paid about $35 million. You have no leverage whatsoever.
You're only getting that for like 2 years. After 2 years, you're done.
Exactly. And
that's what your guaranteed money is in the first 2 years.
You're 100% right. And DeAndre Hopkins, he came to the Texans and said, hey, I want more guaranteed money. They said, bye. Bye. We're going to ship you out to Arizona. Granted, it worked in his favor, but you've had that for years where players have came up and tried to renegotiate contract in any sport, and the owners are like, you're crazy. I'm not paying you that much money. You're not worth that much money. Motherfucker, where would your organization be without me? Nobody would be watching the Houston Texans if Deshaun Watson was not there this year. Well, that's not true because
let me say that I was going to say, because that's where the owners always had power, right? Was, listen, fans are short for fanatics.
Yes.
Right? You're going to go watch the Chiefs, whether they're good or not.
Yep.
And the Raiders game going to be on at Geremy house every Sunday, whether they're good or not.
Yep.
And listen, I watch my New York sports teams. When's the last time a New York team won anything? Right?
2012.
I watch them though, right? And I mean, that's really where it comes. Like, the owners always had control of the dollars.
Yes.
And that's where they have the leverage. The television contracts are negotiated by the league. The commissioner of the league is an employee of the owners. He's the only person who he works for are the owners of any individual league, right?
You're
and
right.
So, for non-players didn't have any of these leverage points because they didn't have control of the dollars. It's crazy. Like, if you go back and hear the stories of a guy like Mickey Mantle, right? Things that happened to him could never happen today. Mickey Mantle, like, the owners used to just put money in his pocket just to keep him quiet. Like, Mick, you want a house, we'll buy your house. You want a car, we'll buy that car. You don't even charge that dinner to me. You don't even have to worry about it. If that man would have knew the level of revenue that he was generating for the New York Yankees, right? The owners were happy to do that stuff for him, so that way he never found out what he could generate. And then you have a guy like Kurt Flood years later, who is like, no, you can't trade me to Philly, St. Louis. I'm not going, right? And then the whole idea of free agency, and think about what free agency has done. It's essentially shifted the entire balance of sports on a global perspective, right? And it's now that we have things like free agency and television contracts, we start to understand the shifting dynamics of money. Then now we get into maybe the early 90s, and you get to finally Reggie White.
Okay.
That's player empowerment, right? Reggie White sitting there with Philly, and he's like, you going to pay me?
Yep.
No, we're not going to pay you. Deuces, I'm going to the Packers,
Yep.
I'm going to go win my Super Bowl, right?
Yep.
And, Geremy and I, we were just talking about Deshaun Watson, right? Leverage, right? When you play that position of quarterback, there's leverage that comes with that. And listen, you could pay me 4 years, 150 some odd million, right? You can give me that contract extension. I appreciate it, right? I saw Deshaun Watson crying when he got the contract on television today.
You're right.
And I won't play another game for you guys if I don't want to. Now what are you going to do? I already got money, so what are you going to do if I say I'm not going to play?
True.
That's how Le'Veon Bell gets out of Pittsburgh, right? Like, that's the reason why Le'Veon Bell was able to get out of Pittsburgh. He's like, I'm going to play. The reason why Emmitt Smith years ago got money out of Jerry Jones is he's like, I'm not going to play.
Yeah.
Jerry's like, fine, whoop, I got a Super Bowl team. That Super Bowl team went 0-2 without Emmitt Smith.
Yep. And then
all of
they
a
paid
sudden, they paid that man.
They paid him.
And then that team went 12-2 and won a Super Bowl after that, right? So, I mean, really, once you understand the dollars and cents, then it only makes sense to take advantage of these leverage points, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars are at stake.
You're 100% right. You bring up Reggie White. So as soon as you bring up Reggie White, all I thought about was Barry Sanders. And that's the complete opposite of player empowerment movement, because your free agency didn't start in the NFL to the early 90s. I think it was like 93, 92, something like that. And I do remember Reggie White, because my dad was talking so much mess. Oh, they paid him. You got to stay there. And he was like, deuces. And then they went and won a Super Bowl with Brett Favre. And then I was like, oh. But then Barry Sanders showed up. And it was like, I'm not playing for this sucky-ass team no more. And they're like, fine, retire. And nobody called him. Nobody traded for him. Nobody picked him up. Barry Sanders was about to break a record in like the next 4 years, and they just let him go. But then you see, and I guess it was because of the long-term contracts that people were signing, which now I think that players have realized with a lot of what had happened before, you have to take the shorter-term contracts, which is exactly what Dak Prescott is trying to do with the Dallas Cowboys. It's no longer, the money aspect is no longer, it's safety for my family and future, because I can make money regardless any place else. Back then, you were under that contract, and they weren't trading you, just like we're seeing the Texans are trying to do this with Deshaun Watson. Le'Veon Bell, they weren't trading him until they realized he was going to sit out the full entire year. But to a player, in my opinion, when it goes to a player, like, you have to be in that scenario where you can sacrifice that money. Like, Dak Prescott signed the franchise contract, which the franchise tag, cool. He'll probably sign the franchise tag again next year. Kirk Cousins is the highest paid player in the league in the last 5 years because of his 2 franchise tags. But with the shorter contracts that players are trying to get, I think that is more of the player empowerment than just the leverage. I think they've realized like that is where their leverage is coming in. Because if you only sign me for 5 to 6 years, 3 years, you have to do something in that 3-year time frame and I can leave. Deshaun Watson can sit the hell out and still get paid. And it would be absolutely stupid for the Texans to still pay him and not trade him. But at the same time, they don't have to trade him. Like it's not like the NBA where he's going to get traded. That one player being on your team, like if you keep having an unhappy Anthony Davis, is completely horrible. The Texans are already fucked up enough as an organization where no free agents are signing with them, so they're not worried about that. They literally could just do what they did with Barry Sanders and go retire. How bad do you want it?
You could do that. I don't think that makes financial sense for them, right? So it doesn't make sense to have this asset that's sitting there that you can actually collect on, right? At some point, you are correct, right? If that in the short term, as an owner, I can hold out because again, it's big bank take little bank. The owners are billionaires, the players are millionaires. At some point, I win because my bank account's bigger. Now, where it does hurt you is when we start talking about, as you said, these individuals that can impact the direction of a franchise, right? You're right. The Texans have more money than Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson plays the position of quarterback. If there were 32 guys on this planet who could play quarterback, he would know it.
Yep.
There aren't. There are 32 starting positions, but there ain't 32 dudes that can do the job.
You're right.
You know that he's a dude that can do it at the most elite levels, right? So you're not just going to replace him. You might put someone in who can play, but you will lose until the cows come home. And as you mentioned before, there is no way free agents going to Houston.
Nope.
After the way you treated J.J. Watt, and now you won't play Deshaun. Well, you can forget it.
DeAndre Hopkins.
You won't even get kids who'll sign. Like you'll draft a kid, and the kid will sit. Which has happened.
Yep.
I mean, we have to go way back.
Jamarcus Russell.
Bo Jackson. I mean, yes, you could draft guys and then just sit. You won't play.
I had to bring up Jamarcus Russell. I had to bring him up.
Why?
Because he's the biggest guy that's set for a contract and ended up being a fucking ass.
I'm gonna imagine all 4 of your tires.
But
I mean, quarterback is the one position that you could have the leverage that we're talking about with NBA superstar, right? There's only certain positions. I think a pitcher could maybe do it in baseball, but baseball's tougher because you have 5 pitchers, right? A goalie could probably do it in hockey. In all honesty, like a goalie, essentially, you could build your whole defense around that. So maybe that you could do it. But there's just certain positions that have leverage too. I don't think that a defensive lineman could do it. A nose tackle can't say, "Oh, I'm not playing." Okay, don't play. Vito Vea, you don't want to play? It's fine. Who cares? Like, you know what I mean? Like, but when you're Deshaun Watson, it's different, and it will hold Houston back because at some point Houston has to say we're moving on.
True.
Right? We got to get a quarterback in here.
Well, I looked at it, and it was only like 3 or 4 players have held out in the NFL over contract or trade disputes. The last one was like Carson Palmer. That was not like a rookie or something like actually held out into the season and set out. The last one was Carson Palmer, and he ended up getting traded to the Raiders like right before training camp or right after that. So in this scenario, since we're talking movement, but if defensive linemen, Kyle Kuzma, like we don't know anybody on hockey that could do it. I don't know how that works. Like you said, maybe a pitcher. Maybe if you get lucky and you're like a Barry Bonds or somebody like that.
Fleury could do it.
Yeah, like Fleury, or maybe if you're like a Barry Bonds or Ryan Howard when he went through arbitration when the Phillies were the stuff, not later on. That tells you how long I paid attention to baseball. But so is it really superstar movement or is it player movement? Like. It's not everybody that can do it. And if it's not everybody that can do it, what happens to the people that get caught up in that move? Go ahead.
What I would say is that there are leverage points even for the non-superstar player. So let's think about a guy like Ray Allen.
Okay.
Ray Allen had leverage. When Ray Allen was on Boston, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was time for that to break up. It was time for the Boston Three Party to go their separate ways.
Yep.
Right? Ray Allen had leverage. And how many years did Ray Allen, people were still trying to call him to get him to come back into the league 3 years after he was done playing. Like, he was done with Miami. And people were trying to call. So I do think that individual players will have individual leverage points. But your leverage, right, is direct proportion to how much you can help move a franchise, how much you can help a team win. Which is why when we start looking at this, we look at James Harden forcing his way out. Mm-hmm. We look at LeBron James and we look at the decision, right?
Yep.
Because those guys shift entire. Like LeBron James, I remember this because I'm a Knicks fan. LeBron James shifted the stock market. He left Cleveland the first time.
Oh yeah.
If you remember, Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh re-signed with Miami before LeBron does it. So everyone thinks, well, Miami doesn't have the money for LeBron. He must be going to the Knicks. And Cablevision stock went up. People are like, LeBron's coming to the Knicks. Like, so when you have that level of power, that level of influence, that's going to be the headline. That's what's going to be on the back pages, right? Now, I think every individual player can influence leverage in certain ways. Now, it's just a matter of what position you happen to be in. Rookies can do it.
Yeah, rookies
can say, I won't sign with the team, right? And even, like, you'll find these moments in the NFL. Who was it Trent Williams? Is this who I'm...
Yeah, the one from...
the offensive tackle with Washington. It was like, I'm not playing.
And he still hasn't played.
Every so often, you can actually influence even if you're not that superstar. What I will say is that the superstars have the most leverage, right? Especially in a sport like basketball where literally that is the difference between you being a playoff team and you being a lottery team.
You have LeBron.
You have that too.
Yep. That is 100% factual in basketball. So back to Trent Williams though, but Trent Williams isn't he's set out, but he's still sitting there. They haven't traded him.
Yeah, but he's got his money. He's a left tackle. He already had money. Like, that's the thing.
True.
Like, what you have to be able to do in these leverage situations, right? Because, again, it's about what leverage you really have. You have to be able to force the thing that you want to get done, which means you have to be willing to say, you know what? My money's good. I'm going to sit. Le'Veon Bell sat. Literally missed a year. He did not sign that franchise tender.
Yep.
Did not get a year toward free agency.
Yep.
Pittsburgh just said, we're not going to franchise you again. We'll just let you go.
Yep.
But he had to be willing to sit that year, though, right? And Trent Williams is the same thing. Like, if he eventually signs, and it's because he sat, and that will be why he signs. Now, he's also older in his career, so we'll see what happens there, right? But that's also a part of the leverage. Where are you in terms of your career, right?
True.
Le'Veon Bell, it was worth it to him. Because they'll cheat running backs out of their money, right? Because the running back will get the rookie deal, and then they'll tack on the extension years from that rookie contract, and then they'll let you go.
Yep.
And then nobody wants to pay you because now you're close to 30.
You're washed up.
Too much miles on your legs, right? So Le'Veon Bell had to say, you know what? I'm just not going to play. Because that's the only way he could have got any sort of money, right? So, again, leverage is going to matter what position you're at in your career, what position you play, and what is it that you're actually trying to do, right? Because J.J. Redick has leverage, but it's not the same leverage that Anthony Davis has.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a matter of understanding what that leverage is for yourself. And I do think that players, more now than ever, understand that regardless of their position within a franchise, they have that leverage and they can take advantage of it. They can use it. They can get themselves into the situation that they want to be in, right? Mm-hmm. Danny Green wins championships because he has leverage.
True.
He can say, I already got money. So I know I'm not going to sign with Detroit just because they're going to pay me more. I'll wait for Toronto, and I'll take that money. And when Kawhi leaves Toronto, you know what? I ain't going back to Toronto.
I'm going to LA.
I'm going to LA. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. Clippers or the Lakers. I'm going to the Lakers. Look at that.
Yep. Won another ring, and now and then he got traded to Philly. So, I mean, but still, even then. Yeah, see, I didn't even think of it. I didn't even think of it that way when I was thinking about it today. Like, I'm glad I didn't even look at it that way. I was literally just looking at the shift. Like, how, for instance, like we said with LeBron, you're 100% right. If you're in the NBA, getting a superstar is the difference between being a lottery team and being a championship contender. If you have LeBron, you're probably going to end up in the finals. But I didn't even think about the leverage depending on what position you're in, because you're 100% right. Like, J.J. Redick has tons of leverage in the NBA because he knows his position. He knows his role. He's a shooter. He knows what he brings to a team. That type of leverage I wasn't thinking of. I was just thinking of more or less the ability and the superstar stardom opposed to each individual player. Like, yeah, Kyle Kuzma doesn't have leverage right now because he's still on his rookie scale contract. But give him a couple years, and yeah, you're 100% right there. Everybody does have some sort of, leverage. J.J. Watt asked for his release, and the Texans were like, "You're right. He knows where it's." Yeah, I didn't even think of that scenario. Geremy, are you gonna?
Football leverage is different than basketball.
It's way different. Because there's so many more players on. But okay, do you think that NBA basketball player movement is coming to the NFL? Because I keep thinking that this is literally a sign of when you hear, and it's not even the fact that you're hearing Deshaun Watson request a trade. Who would not want to get the hell out of that place? But when you hear Aaron Rodgers say little slight shady comments that I don't know where I'm going to be next season. When you hear Russell Wilson come out and go, "Oh, to let you know, I'm tired of getting hit all the time. We got to make some moves." You heard the stories of Brett Favre begging for people when he was in Green Bay trying to get Randy Moss. But now you're seeing that players are actually in the NFL talking to teams, and if you're one of those quarterbacks or a high-level receiver or even a high-level defensive player, they're listening to you now. Do you think that what's happening in the NBA is going to transpire over to the NFL?
So I don't think that it can because of contract structure. So Geremy and I, we were talking before the podcast, and we were talking about Trent Brown, right? With the Raiders,
yeah.
Right? And what we were talking about is, so I asked Geremy, I was asking about the quarterback position, right? Because the Raiders and the quarterbacks and Gruden and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I asked him about Derek Carr, and we were talking about who could you get in, right? And love to get Deshaun Watson, can't because of the cap.
Yeah.
That's the difference between the NFL and the NBA. Right? In the NBA, there's a cap.
Mm-hmm.
That cap be softened with luxury taxes and all these sorts of things. You have guaranteed contracts in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
Those leverage points are just different, right? In football, between the way that the contracts are structured, where your guaranteed money is mostly up front, so if you're not good after 2 years, we'll let you go, because the cap impact isn't really that big a deal. The way that they can control a rookie for 5 years, those pieces with the NFL contract just make it different. So they can't fully be like the NBA. However, where it will be like the NBA is if you are a quarterback. Because the quarterback position, that's the one position in the NFL that's paid like NBA players are paid.
True.
Literally, your boy Patrick Mahomes got a $500 million contract.
$42 million. I'm okay with all of it. I'm okay with all of it.
Right, and that's the thing. No one's going to be mad at him for signing that contract. Nope. Everyone's going to be happy, right? He shifts the whole paradigm for NFL players, for quarterbacks, right? But quarterbacks can do that. But the linebacker can't. I don't care how good a linebacker you are. How good was Khalil Mack? The Raiders still traded him. Right?
True.
Not to dig at Geremy too much. But you get the point, right? He's a good player. He should be on the Raiders.
Yeah, he should
be sacking the quarterback now for them.
Yep.
They would move on from him.
Okay.
And think about how they can't move on from Derek Carr, even though it seems like Gruden wants to.
I've been saying that forever.
Different than every other position.
So that's
it's
what
different than every other position.
The only thing I'm thinking that football players could do, because you're 100% right, the way the salaries are completely different with the guaranteed money and the dead cap money and all that other stuff. It's very, very easy to figure out salaries in NBA. But the only thing I'm thinking is more or less on short-term contracts. That's the only way they're leveraged. Like, I think Dak is, and again, he's a quarterback, but I think Dak is going to start something, and and that's what happened with the NBA. People forget Michael Jordan signed a 10-year contract in 1989 or 1987. 10 years. In what? Your Knicks signed Penny Hardaway for how many years? Or not Penny. Who was the other guy? Allen Houston. How 10-year contract for Allen Houston? I'm not tripping, right? It was like 10. That was 20 years ago.
No, it was crazy money.
Yeah, but that was 20, 25, 20. in between 20 to 25, 30 years ago. So you started seeing slowly contracts going down, 7 years, 3 years, and then LeBron came in and is doing these 1-and-1s, which Kevin Durant picked up. And now you're seeing James Harden say, I'm not signing a 2-year extension when I have 2 years left. And I think that's what the NFL is going to do. I think that's the only way that they can get an empowerment movement going very similar to the NBA. It kind of sucks in certain aspects. Running backs, you're completely taken off of it. You're done. You have no player empowerment movement. They control you for 5 years. And after 5 years, unless you're Derrick Henry or Adrian Peterson, most of you are done. Like, you're not that level of production that's going to get paid like a quarterback. But I could definitely see receivers, quarterbacks, Richard Sherman when he was in his prime with the Legion of Boom and Aaron Rodgers decided not to throw. I could see them signing shorter contracts, and that's how they come up with the player empowerment movement, where they have more control of where they go in that time frame. And again, their money is only guaranteed for 2 to 3 years anyway. What do you think about that?
So two perspectives to offer. The first one is, I do think that, again, every position has leverage, but what running backs have to be willing, Le'Veon Bell and Emmitt Smith give you the plan.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to follow that plan. I won't play. Now, all of a sudden, you just have this asset that's sitting around. You're either going to pay him or you're going to allow him to move on. Like, that's where they get their leverage. Mm-hmm. But you have to be willing. You have to be willing to commit to that, which can be hard, especially if you didn't manage your money well.
True.
Right? Like if you got 6 Lamborghinis, guess what? You
4 houses.
Because you got to pay them cars off,
yep.
right? So the other perspective to offer is that I disagree with the NFL in shorter contracts because of the nature of the NFL. The reason why I think basketball players can get away with this, fully guaranteed contracts, is one thing. Understand that the fully guaranteed nature of the contract means Kevin Durant can tear his Achilles.
Yeah, and get paid. Yeah.
Football players don't have that. So the leverage point for a football player that would have to change, and it's interesting because you said that you believe that the shift could come with a guy like Dak Prescott. Mm-hmm. What I would argue is that the shift has actually already come if it's going to move in this direction. And there was a guy you mentioned earlier. Kirk Cousins was actually the guy.
True. You're 100% right, yeah.
Because he got a fully guaranteed contract from Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So he took his franchise money for 2 years. Washington could not pay him the third year because it would have been $40 million or something. And so then he's on the open market. He's like, if you want me, I need a fully guaranteed contract. What ends up happening with most football players that are at that level, especially at the quarterback position, they never see free agents.
That's true.
This is why when Peyton Manning was a free agent, it was such a big deal a few years ago.
True.
I can remember being a kid, Boomer Esiason being a free agent, and the Jets going crazy because the Jets are like, we have nothing. We can go get Boomer. Boomer can be our starting quarterback. And then the Jets did it a few years later. I can't remember the guy's name. Neil O'Donnell.
Yeah.
Left Pittsburgh and then went to the Jets, right?
I remember him.
Happens so rarely, the quarterback position, that it's like, okay, I don't know how we can make those leverage points work. A quarterback has to get to free agency. When you get to free agency, now you can demand what you want.
Yeah, it's totally different.
And so it's interesting. Kirk Cousins, I think, has started that. It's interesting to see what Dak will do. I'm of the mind that Dak will not re-sign with Dallas, and it's not that he doesn't want to play in Dallas or anything to that effect. I think that at this point, Dallas offered him a franchise tender. He signed it and then got injured. Mm-hmm. He wants long-term security. If they offer him another franchise tender, he just won't sign it and then he just won't play. And we saw Dallas was 6-10 without him.
Okay.
So you're not a good team. You can't. And if there were 32 guys who could do the job, everybody would be good at quarterback. It's not. And so when you have that guy, you're either going to pay him what he wants, and if you're Dallas and you're like, well, we can't do it, now you got an asset.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to pay that. So you might as well utilize that asset. It's the same thing with Houston. Like, don't get me wrong. I think Houston's crazy because Deshaun Watson is so good that if you give him up, you're just going to be chasing, trying to get that again. But if he won't play,
you got to trade him.
Now you got an asset. And these guys the owners are business people. Like, this is who they are, right? So they get it. I'm going to leverage this asset for revenue in some way, shape, or form. Right? In this case, the revenue might be representative of draft picks or players that I could get in. Like if you're Deshaun Watson, right, you tell the Houston Texans you're not going to play. Why would the Houston Texans not go to Jacksonville and say, hey, listen, we want that first pick in the draft. You could draft Trevor Lawrence, but you don't know.
Yep.
You know Deshaun can play.
Yep.
Why not ask him? I mean, what's the worst they can tell you? No. You already don't have the first pick in the draft.
True.
It can't hurt you anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then if oh, by the way, Jacksonville says no, then go to the Jets.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, you got the second pick in the draft. Nah, we don't really want Sam Darnold, but we'll take this pick, and then we'll take your picks in the next 3 years. And oh, by the way, you got 4 picks in the first 2 rounds this year. Give us 3 of those. Give us your first round pick 2 years down the road. Give us a second round pick next year. I got a package of 5 draft picks. Okay, now you can have Deshaun Watson.
I agree with that.
You know what I mean? So
yeah. I think Deshaun Watson will end up getting traded. I just think right now that the Texans are trying to play hardball to try to get teams to bid against each other. But no, you're 100%. Yeah, you're 100. Yeah, that's all they're doing. But you're 100% right with the quarterbacks. They're not going to get to free agent now. Diz, if I'm not mistaken, Dak in the Dallas. So Dak getting injured, you're saying is going to want him to have a long-term contract now, right? Because originally he wanted a short term. So, yeah, I see what you're saying there. But if you're like, your quarterbacks never get there. So maybe there is no way. Like, there is going to be a little bit of leverage. But the way that the contracts are and the way that in the NFL, it doesn't look like the empowerment movement is going to be huge in the NFL. Unless, like, the only way I see that, and it's not with quarterbacks, because of how violent the sport is, it is very, very hard to say I'm only going to sign a 3-year deal. But you're talking about sitting out for a year. If you really want to put leverage on people, your contract's only guaranteed for 3 years anyway. Like, DeAndre Hopkins' money was gone after 3 years. So if y'all really want to be smart and see what the NBA is doing and get a fully guaranteed contract, sign a short-term contract and just pray you don't get injured. I know that sucks, but in the NFL, if you're not Dak Prescott, even if he would have tore his ACL on his contract, they would have still paid him. But if you were Michael Gallup on the wide receiver, who's a good wide receiver, but if you tore your ACL, they're not paying you. They're going to release you anyway. That's the only way I see that they can get more empowered of their careers and of their financial is you got to take a chance and go, look, no, I want a fully guaranteed 3-year contract after your 5th or 6th year, which, again, a lot of players are only in the NFL for 4 to 6 years anyway. It's like that's the average time frame, so a lot of them don't even get to the second contract.
So funny because you pointed out the correct perspective, which is understand that your contracts are short anyway.
Yeah. That's just my only thought process. Like, to get to where you want to be, you have to take a chance, and it's gonna suck if you get injured, but you're gonna get cut anyway. You're gonna get cut. They're not
traded or whatever.
Yeah, or
you're gonna get traded, or they're gonna renegotiate the deal. They'll move your money around.
Exactly.
And all this funny stuff, right? Where we'll take this money, we'll put it here, and then you never really see it. Like if you approach it from the mindset of it doesn't matter when they tell me it's a 6-year, $120 million deal, because really it's a 3-year, $60 million deal, because that's all you're guaranteeing me is the $60 million on the first 3 years.
Exactly.
I mean, and I do think that there's a lot of football players at the highest levels that kind of look at it that way. If you are a football player and you can get 4 years for $80 million guaranteed, you're going to always try to do that because of the nature of the sport. So you're always going to push to try to get more years and more. It's the reason why Richard Seymour had to leave New England, right?
Yeah, yep.
Because Richard Seymour went to Bill Belichick and said, I need 4 years. And Bill Belichick basically said,
no.
Listen, I think you got 2 more good years left in you, but I don't think you got 4 more, so I'm going to let you go, right? And he signs, Geremy's like, why do you keep digging at me? But he signs with the Raiders, but he had 2 good years with the Raiders.
He did.
That contract was not good because he plays defensive line. He's in a car crash every play, right? And so eventually you just wear down. But, I mean, if you kind of reframe the way that you look at a contract as a lower-level NFL player to say, hey, listen, really, I'm only signing short-term deals anyway because based on the nature of guaranteed contracts, I'm only getting the money in the front end anyway. You start to shift your paradigm a little bit, then maybe you can get some folks who kind of think of it that way. I will say, though, I would imagine when your agent comes to you, because here's the deal, right? Agent's getting 10%. And the agent isn't getting 10% of your guaranteed money.
I know.
Agent's getting 10% of the total. So when the agent comes to you and says, hey, listen, I got you a 5-year deal for $90 million, right? You as a player want to know, hey, what's the guarantee on that? The agent's like, it don't matter. I'm getting 10% of the 90 number.
You ain't my
You know what
agent.
I'm saying?
You ain't my, yeah, you get the Rich Paul agent. You go to LeBron and get Rich Paul. Like, you go get Drew Rosenhaus. You get the agents that can get you what you want, whether you are sitting in a carport doing sit-ups and ordering pizzas for people and still get you on another team. You get those type of agents. You get the agents that, like, I completely see what you're saying, and that's like, it doesn't matter if you're a superstar in the NFL. You're getting your money. All the time. Like, Khalil Mack could get injured right now and the Bears are not cutting him. But for the lower players that aren't, that's the way I think you have your leverage. Because in the NFL, you don't have leverage. They will cut you. And if you get cut in the NFL, it's not like getting cut in the NBA. It's not like, oh, so-and-so got cut, and then automatically he's on another team. A lot of times you see people get cut, and they don't play again. It's like, where did they go? Where did Victor Cruz go? He was there, and out of nowhere, he just disappeared. Like, he retired? Like, that happens all the time in the NFL. Those are the players that I think, if the player empowerment movement, because you know they watch what's going on in the NBA. And that's, I think, even in the NBA, that's what it took for owners to understand we're in trouble here. They went from 10 years to 7 years to 5 years to 3 to 3 and a player option. Like, that's kind of how they worked it. And I just think in the NFL, if they want to change, because NFL players are fucked. Like, they are the worst paid, in my opinion, players out of every league. They just, you said it, a D-line is in a car accident every single time he runs into somebody. They are consistently injured. You don't ever see an NFL player at 60 years old that looks anywhere near the same way he looked at that same point in time. You see that tons in other sports besides hockey with the teeth. But you see Barry Bonds right now walking around, even though he took tons of steroids, walking around doing good. If Barry Bonds was in the NFL, he'd be walking with a limp. His right arm wouldn't work, and his fingers would probably be broke. I just think in the NFL, with how dangerous it is, if they want the money that they were talking about during the 2019 NBA season when all those players signed, they've got to figure out a better leverage for the non-superstars. Geremy, are you going to say anything? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Chaka. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's only going to come with a new collective bargaining
agreement.
Like, they have to collect. They have to change the whole financial structure, which, oh, by the way, there's no owner going to do that.
No, of course not.
Owners recognize that they have owners have leverage in the NFL the way that basketball owners wish they had. You know what I mean? And so they're not going to give up that level of control, right? Baseball players, like, we can talk about the lack of a salary cap in baseball, but when you start looking at what a baseball contract looks like and the years of control when a dude's in the minor leagues and he's first coming up and arbitration and all, they will have you from the time you're 18 until you're 25.
I know.
Franchise controls you. And then it's only when you're like 25 that then you can actually exercise your leverage. And, of course, most players ain't making it to 25.
Nope.
Right? So the whole collective bargaining agreement would have to change. And I don't know that the owners are going to be willing to negotiate at the levels that the players are going to need to really shift the paradigm. So unless, like, a bunch of players collectively just get together and say, hey, listen, we're going to shift the paradigm by all getting together and demanding fully guaranteed contract. Unless you get something crazy on a large scale that's coordinated, it's not going to happen. But incidentally, that's what happened in basketball. Like, LeBron and D-Wade and Chris Bosh, and it was supposed to be Carmelo, and then it ended up being Chris Bosh, which is a whole nother story. But these guys got together and coordinated and said, we are going to decide our fates. We're going to decide our futures because we have that ability to be able to leverage that control. That was a coordinated effort, unless you can get a bunch of football players to do that, and it would be more than like 3 players. It's got to be basically a free agent class. Who says we're going to all stand together. We will not sign contracts that are not fully guaranteed. It's going to be very difficult, right? The rank and file fullback, when someone comes to him and says, hey, listen, you can wait for this fully guaranteed contract, but chances are they're just going to replace you in the league. But I'll give you this 3-year, $9 million contract right now. Kids go to private school right now.
Yeah.
So what do you want to do? You know what I mean? It's just hard because it's, again, different leverage points. And so, it would almost have to be players subsidizing each other.
True.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, Patrick Mahomes would have to say, listen, I got $500 million. I'll take care of a free agent class with me if we all hold out.
True.
Like, that's not going to happen. Like,
No.
you know what I mean? Like, no one's counting Patrick Mahomes' money for Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, you're right.
That's his money. But everyone else has to worry about theirs. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. No, you're right on that. Geremy, what do you think?
I mean, you guys said everything. Like, this is why I like being quiet.
Okay. So look, we'll talk as a fan because we're all fan of sports here. Do you like player empowerment movement? Like you said it earlier, I'm a diehard Chiefs fan. I've been a Chiefs fan since 1985. So I grew up an hour and a half away from Kansas City. Like I've watched them through before Patrick Mahomes, and no matter what, I still had my Chiefs gear on. I still had my shirt on every Sunday. I was watching the game. It did not matter. I'm a Sixers fan because of Allen Iverson. I've always liked them. I love, even when they were tanking, I was 100% behind the trust the process. But as a fan, do you think it ruins sports? Does it bother you? Do you like it? What are your thoughts of it?
I like player empowerment when it helps my team. I hated player empowerment when LeBron didn't sign with the Knicks. I mean, but that's our fandom. Is we're loyal to laundry. It don't matter who wears the laundry. We're loyal to laundry.
Yeah.
Right? It didn't, like, if it was Christian Okoye, and then it was Joe Montana, and then it was Tony Gonzalez, and now it's Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
It don't matter.
Nope.
You root for all of them dudes, right? And Geremy can take it back to, right, Bo Jackson through Tim Brown. Then Jerry Rice, you hate Jerry Rice. He plays for San Francisco. You love him when he plays for your team, though, right? You know what I mean? And so I'm the same way, right? Listen, I just ran you through the Jets' history of quarterbacks in my lifetime, right? I mean,
yes.
I can. It's not pretty, but I root for the team. So when player empowerment helps my team, it's awesome. When player empowerment hurts my team, it sucks. But I'm gonna keep rooting for the team. That's the deal with fan, right? Short for fanatic. Like the response that we have to sports and to our teams, it's not logical. We spend our money. The owners don't really know us. We are nameless, faceless masses that just pump money into a machine. And boy, we don't stop pumping money in. And they can screw us in every way possible, right? The burgers will be $50 more next year, and the parking spaces are and you can't even get season tickets now unless you are someone who owns a business or something like that. I mean, so as much as owners will do things to disparage the Joe average fan, I still root for my team, right? And so player empowerment for me, I love it when it helps my team, right? I love it when I can get a guy to come in, right? You don't love it when, OBJ wants to leave the Giants. You don't love it when Khalil Mack wants to leave the Raiders. You wouldn't love it if Patrick Mahomes held out and said, I'm going to go to free agency. You probably wouldn't love player empowerment.
Yep.
You get signed into a 10-year, $500 million contract, you don't have to worry about that, right?
Yep.
So I genuinely feel that way. Like, if I'm a player, it's one thing, but as a fan, it's like, I just want the best guys on my team because then my team wins, and then when I go to work, I can talk smack to my boys.
Yep.
Right? That's my level of involvement because no one's paying me. If they start paying me as a fan, maybe I'll have a different a free agent fan? Somebody wants to pay me? That's fan empowerment.
I'd be loving that right there.
I'll be the water boy.
Jeremy, what do you think as a fan? How do you feel of player
I
empowerment?
mean, I feel the same way. I mean, it's great when it works out for you, but when it doesn't work out for you, it sucks. It's like when we lost Khalil Mack, that shit hurt. Because, I mean, he was a great player. I mean, he went to Chicago. I mean, he hasn't really done anything. He hasn't had the season like he did in Oakland.
True.
But he's still a great player. I mean, I wish there was a way for us to get him back. But it's like you said, when it works out in your favor, it's good. When it doesn't, it sucks.
It doesn't bother me. Like, I love player empowerment movement. I'm one of those fans. Like, I get, like, trust me, if Patrick Mahomes came up tomorrow and said, You motherfuckers couldn't support me in the Super Bowl. I got sacked 8 fucking times. I ran 498 yards before I threw the fucking ball. I won off this piece of shit team. Oh, I would be pissed as a mug. I'm not even gonna lie. I would be so mad it wouldn't even be funny. But
my phone would not stop blowing up if that happened.
But at the same time, like, judging from not my team, I always look at what the franchise did. As fans, we have always said we want our players to care about winning rings. We want them to care about rings as much as we want them to care about money, and we have said that for years. So I remember when LeBron came in, I didn't like LeBron James much when he came in the league because I was like, you're the king, you're anointed. You haven't done nothing. You got a $90 million contract from Nike and you've never even dunked a basketball in an NBA game. Why is this happening? I ate my words really, really quickly because he turned out to be the truth and all real, but I started liking him more when he left for Miami. I'm not a Cleveland Cavaliers fan, so I have no emotional support to that team. If I was in Cleveland, I'm damn sure not buying a jersey I paid for. I'm not burning a jersey I paid for. But if I was in that, I probably would have been highly upset. But I can also go back and go, well, you guys decided not to trade for Amari Stoudemire because you wanted J.J. Hickson. The best player you put around him was Mo Williams. Khalil Mack. Y'all could have paid him. Like, he wanted more money. The reason why 90% of the time these people are getting traded has nothing to do with the player. It's like, hey, I want more money. I think I deserve 4 years like Richard Seymour. You got 2. Deuces. We don't care what you did for 8 to 10 years for us. We care more what you can do for us now. So, like, as a fan of all sports, I love player empowerment movement. I've been lucky that it's never happened to any of my teams. Never. I'm a Royals fan, Chiefs fan, and a Sixers fan. I really don't pay attention to baseball except when the Royals are good, which is twice every 35 years. So
You got a World Series.
I got 1 ring. I knew the whole team that year, okay? But no matter what, that's the issue. Like we don't. As a fan, I look back at the organization and go, you failed them. Like, I feel horrible for a Houston Texans fan right now. Not because Deshaun Watson wants to leave. Because the organization you root for sucks. Everybody felt bad for the Cleveland Browns as fans. Not because we wanted them to win, but because that organization was so pitiful. Like, when player empowerment movement comes up to me, it's all about where did the franchise go wrong. Unless you're like a certain team that they're like, I don't want to go to, like Eli Manning with the Giants and the Chargers. You could not do anything to do that. Certain teams that don't want to go, players that don't want to go to Toronto and Canada because they don't want to play in Toronto. But when I look at players and they're moving, most of the players that have been traded didn't ask to be traded. They were like, hey, we want more money, and the team's like, we're not going to pay you, so you're gone. So as a fan of it, I love it. I think it makes the NFL and the NBA, more the NBA, way better because you know that organization has a set amount of time to do everything in their power to try and win. And if they don't, they're screwed. That player is going to get up and leave and get traded. Kawhi Leonard wanted out of the Spurs, and the Raptors had no shot of re-signing him ever when they traded for him. But they said, we're going to go all in for that one season. And then halfway through that season, they got Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka. Or they got Marc Gasol, they already had Serge Ibaka. They had Marc Gasol and somebody else. And they traded for Marc Gasol halfway through the season.
Asking how y'all are doing.
What?
Major Sports Simulations is asking how y'all are doing.
We are doing excellent. But they traded for him and they went all in on them. That's what you do when you have a superstar. The Lakers traded 4 players to get Anthony Davis for LeBron James. They drafted all those players and told them, we want your names in rafters. And 2 years later, Lonzo Ball was the fuck out of that team, out of the town. When, as an organization with player empowerment movement, in my opinion, not as much in NFL, but it gives you, as a fan, more to look forward to because you know that if your team doesn't do everything in their power to put a good product on the field and win, that player is going to leave. So for those 3 to 4 years, you're going to have a great placement. Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis may never win a title. But for 3 to 4 years, 5 years, they are championship contenders. They are in there. there because of him wanting to sign there or because of the leverage that he held before they signed. They traded for Drew Holiday. They made tons of trade. They played Chris Middleton. They are going to be good for the next 5 to 6, 7 years. They weren't good before Giannis showed up. If Giannis decided to leave because they couldn't win, just enjoy the years you were good. Because if you're a fan of a horrible team, as Raiders fans know in this decade, as all New York fans know, as Chiefs fans and Royals fans and Sixers have known, Chiefs fans before Mahomes, you don't have many good years as a fan to root unless you are the fucking New England Patriots or the San Antonio Spurs or maybe the Yankees in the 90s and early 2000s. But just enjoy it, and in my opinion, player empowerment movement has put the responsibility on the organization to be good at that moment that they have the talent. I know that was a long, drawn-out answer for that, but that's basically what I was trying to say.
Oh, but it's a good, well thought through, developed answer. What I would say to that is that that's great perspective to have when it's not your team,
yeah.
Right? Like it's a great objective perspective, and I'm a fan. I can't be objective about the Jets. I just want my Jets to win, right? And so when if someone wants to leave, then it's hard for me to come with that objective, rational perspective, right? It's hard to. Even so, I'm a Yankees fan. I grew up. I used to walk to Yankee games. That's how close I lived to the stadium.
Okay.
And so let me just say, people, because I'm 40 years old. So I'm born in 1980.
Okay.
Yankees sucked when I was a kid.
Okay.
1980s were not some great decade for the Yankees. They were awful. And I remember the Yankees having Roberto Kelly. He was the only All-Star, and we traded him for some guy named Paul O'Neill who platooned with Cincinnati. And I wanted to cry. Like, why are we trading the one guy who can actually play, right? And the Yankees go through this period where they become the Yankees again, right? Like, it's this great time where they're winning. And that's awesome when you are in the midst of that, right? And you could be maybe a little bit more objective because in my lifetime, I've seen the Yankees win plenty, right? But I'm also a Knicks fan.
And you've never
I haven't seen them win a ton.
Nope.
And so it's hard for me to be objective there, right? Like, it's hard for me to not understand why we can't find a way to get a Kevin Durant or a Kyrie Irving to want to come here. It's hard for me to understand why we would trade all the assets we did to get Carmelo when Carmelo says he wants to sign. Just wait and let's add him to that core. Right? It's hard for me to understand it because I can't be objective, right? And so now when it's the same thing with player empowerment now, right? When you have a dude who's on your team and it's looking good and he looks like he's going to be a solid player, like I understand why New Orleans fans are mad at Anthony Davis. Because I'd be mad too if I was a Pelicans fan, right? And I mean, I understand why Raiders fans are pissed at Khalil Mack, right? Because he leaves. Like, he's there. He's 19 sacks in a season, defensive player of the year. Where you want to go? Now, from his perspective, find a way to pay me and I would stay, right? But I'm a fan. All that stuff, that's all y'all figure that stuff out, man. I just want to see my team win on Sunday. If it's a basketball team, I want to see them win 3 times a week. And if I'm a baseball fan, I want to see them win 6 times a week, right? Because I just want to watch the game to see my team win. So the perspective that you offer, objective and great, and it's honestly the perspective that we should have, except we're too emotionally invested to bring that level-headedness to the situation. Like, I got too much emotion invested in whether or not the Giants win to be like, oh, if Saquon Barkley got screwed out of this thing and he wants to leave, then I'm fine with that. Nope. Saquon must die with the Giants.
I understand that because when Tony Gonzalez left, I remember when he left and he said he wanted to leave and he wanted to win. And I wasn't mad that he wanted to leave because he gave his career to us. I was mad that he picked the fucking Falcons. I was hella mad because I'm like, you wanted to win and you went to pick the Falcons? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You suck! Like, that was my issue. But, like, I think a lot of this has to do with, like, one of my best friends is a Patriots fan. And if you notice, like, the way the Patriots have reacted to Tom Brady leaving, they would have been in the Super Bowl. They would have been in the playoffs this year, definitely. If Tom Brady was there. They sucked. They were horrible watching. Mm-hmm. And all of them were happy for Brady, and I guess that's because of the servitude that he put. And, of course, it's very easy when you've won for 20 years to say that. But I just like again, I haven't really had it happen to my team, so I've always been the opposite. I've always been like, I mean, even when Allen Iverson left, I was like, when he left the Sixers, I was like, seriously, you guys put nobody around him. Like, you had Dikembe Mutombo was the best dude you put around him. Now, granted, he was a pain in the ass to. Yeah, but he was a pain in the ass to get around. But my thought process was like, Dikembe, Chris Webber, what are y'all talking about? Like, what? So, I've never had it where they rip. And again, he had played with us for 10 years before he left, basically, so I could see the service. I've never had like a Khalil Mack that's like either pay me or trade me. But at the same time, like, you've been a part
of their career.
Yeah, exactly. But
prime of their career, yeah.
So, and you're 100% right when you said, like, why would the organization trade for Carmelo Anthony when they could sign him in the offseason? But you bring it back to the point that we're way too invested. Because I'm telling you right now, when the Chiefs lose, the next day I have a horrible day. Like, my weekend depends on whether or not the Chiefs win or lose. So, like, when your team loses, it's ridiculous. You try to find excuses for it, and like when we lost the Super Bowl, oh, it's no shame in losing to Brady. I didn't want to talk about it for like 3 days. But like you're like that's right. Like when it happened, you're right. When we are way too invested as fans in the franchises, because we have years. I'm 39. I was born in 82, so I just turned 39. So we have years invested into these franchises where most of us have loved these. We've never loved anything as much as we love our franchises. We can go back to elementary school, and the only constant is that franchise that you loved. Everything else has changed. Your wants, your taste, all of that stuff. You like bologna as a kid, you don't like it now.
It's your family, man.
Yeah,
like,
you're right.
I mean, you are like a lot of us are born into like I'm born in Brooklyn, grew up in Harlem. Okay. I'm born into my New York sports family.
Got you.
My dad was an immigrant from Trinidad and Tobago who moves to New York. He roots for all the New York teams. So what do? We root for all the New York teams. Like, all I've known in all my life is rooting for these teams. So, Of course, I'm going to love them regardless. But that's where that emotional craziness comes from, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I haven't loved anything as long as I've actually.
That's right.
I've been married to my wife going on almost 20 years. I've loved these teams longer.
Way
than
more. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? It's so crazy. It's really it's your.
That was just spot on the nail. Like as soon as you said that, I was like, that makes so much sense. Like, because we are. You're right. Fans is short for fanatics, and we are nuts. Like the players don't care as much as we do. It's not even on the same level. Like. So
it's a job for them, but it should be.
Yeah.
Because the owners, they're assets.
Yep.
So for me, this is a job.
Yep.
Like, the players get reminded. This is why, like, that objective perspective, this is, like, from a player's perspective, I understand player empowerment 100%. Because I am an asset. Actually, you know what it is? It's fake. That's what it, because we are family until I want more money, then I'm an asset.
Yep.
So, then, when they cut me, it's a business decision. It's nothing personal. This is business. Right? Okay. So if you're going to remind me in these instances about it being business, then the players better know it's business from the jump.
True.
Which is what LeBron figured out with the decision, right?
Yep.
It's what Reggie White figured out in football to become the first free agent, right?
Yep.
It's what Kurt Flood figured out in the 50s, 60s.
Yep.
Baseball, right? Is that these guys treat players as assets because players generate revenue. And as long as you're going to be treated as an asset that understand the business and don't become emotionally tied into the business, because once your emotions get invested in it, then you're a fan. You are illogical and you wreck the laundry even when maybe the ownership doesn't do all the things to support you. And we've seen players do this, by the way. Like, there have been players that have been illogically loyal to teams.
Yes.
Right? John Stockton. John Stockton is a dude who's just illogically loyal to Utah. He had opportunities to leave, but he wouldn't leave. Yep. It was a different time back then. We weren't talking player empowerment. But Karl Malone left.
Yep.
Karl Malone finally said, I got to go win, guys.
Yep.
It ain't going to happen here. You know what I mean? So to each their own. You know, respect to John Stockton. Respect to a guy like Dame Lillard who says he never wants to leave. He's going to stick it out. You know what? Respect to you if that's what you want to do. Right? But I also understand LeBron. and Chris Bosh, and even to a certain extent Kevin Durant. I don't like that Kevin Durant leaves Oklahoma City to go to Golden State like that.
I hated that.
I mean, I don't like that.
I hated that.
I don't like it as a competitor, right? Like competitive that feels like ugh. But that's player empowerment too.
Yeah, yeah.
Go where you want to go.
Yeah.
I want to go win a ring. Where else can I go for a ring? This team won 73 games last year.
Yep.
They should have won the championship if Draymond didn't punch LeBron in the jump.
Yep.
They win a ring.
Yep.
But go bounce there.
Yep.
I get it, right?
Mm-hmm. That you're 100% right with the Kevin Durant move to Golden State. The player empowerment, that is exactly player empowerment. I just hated that move with my soul. Like, that to me told me everything I wanted to know about him. Like, you know when you meet those people and you're like, oh, if I got into a fight, he would definitely run away. That's the first thought I thought of when I heard it. When Kevin, I was like, dude, that's the guy that would get in a fight at the playground, and you turn around and he'd be running down the street, and y'all getting jumped by 3 to 4 people. Like, that was the first thought I thought when it came to that. But no, you're like, it's just so hard because you're right. Like the objective, the fanness that we have. Okay, so what? Hold on, let me go back. When we were talking about that, so do you think that we as fans and the people in the media have created this? And when I say that, I mean because we mentioned John Stockton. I think John Stockton is one of the greatest point guards ever to play the game, and I would literally argue this to my death, and I will put him against anybody else. And people are like, look, as a true point guard, he was everything you wanted. Karl Malone is who Karl Malone is because of John Stockton, not the other way around. It's complete. Now, Karl Malone would still be very, very talented, but would he be the leading scorer of the NBA or one behind that? Most likely not. But because he didn't win a ring, he gets no recognition. Like, that's always a thing that we say. It's like, oh, well, Magic has 5. John Stockton has 0. Yeah, but he played in 2 with Jordan. Well, he's overrated because he has 0. If John Stockton was in this day and age right now, John Stockton would be going to get a ring. Like, he happened to be before social media got big. I truly believe that if he was in this day and age, he'd be right along with the player empowerment movement because he'd be like, no, you got to get a ring for you to stand in legacy. As fans, with our obsession of our teams winning and our franchise winning, and media's obsession with the greatest of all time being compared with those rings, do you think that we have kind of caused players to care more about winning, basically in the NBA, because that's what they care about? It's not about the money. They're getting money. They're leaving tons of money on the table. It's about being put in the best position to win a ring. Do you think that we are guilty of the player empowerment movement as fans and media?
Yes, but not for the reasons that you stated.
Okay.
So I do think that players care about legacy and these sorts of things, but they cared about that before social media, right? Because I always say this, like, social media is different because there's a certain level of instant gratification that you can get in terms of communication, right? Kevin Durant doesn't have a burner if social media is not important.
Yeah.
But before social media, Chaka from Mount Vernon could still call Sports Talk Radio and talk about how John Stockton needs to stop shooting in Game 7 of the 1994 NBA Finals.
Okay.
And it was just different, right?
Mm-hmm. Now,
so there's the legacy piece, and I do think that media fans play into that, but I also think that players, like, the irrationality that you have to make it at the professional level,
True.
To say it doesn't matter what I go up against, I'm so much better. Like, there's a level of ego that comes into that the players come by honestly in order to make it to the levels that they make it to. So I don't know that we contribute in that way as much as the way that we really contribute to player empowerment is the irrationality that I talked about before. With fans, we continue to pay, so we pump money into this capitalist machine that allows players to the exorbitant amounts of dollars for superstar players. You can't help but learn business and understand that you are an asset. And where the media plays into that is with television contracts, right? The proliferation of media, the fact that people want to watch games, we have to stream, right? I got a game on my phone, and then I got one on my iPad, and then I got one on my like the proliferation of media has led to multi-billion-dollar contracts, and all those billions of dollars get funneled into the pockets of professional athletes. It should get funneled into the pockets of collegiate athletes, but we could do that another time.
Oh, I would love to go on that one. I'm all there with you.
That's player empowerment too. We could talk about that maybe a little bit as well. But the fact that you have a system, billions of dollars.
You were saying.
All I was saying was that it's really the capitalist machine that is sport that feeds into this idea of player empowerment, right? And so, from a fan and media's perspective, the fact that we are the engine that pumps billions of dollars into this machine, that's how we have created player empowerment. It's not really about the kind of emotional pieces and the ego pieces, because the players have that anyway. Players come by that honestly. That has nothing to, like, fans contribute to it, but fans didn't create it. The players had that before they got in. The fans power the capitalist machine. The proliferation of media greases the wheels of that capitalist engine.
Getting a drink.
That's how we contribute to player empowerment. And as long as we keep being fanatical and we need our media and we have to watch our games, none of that's going to change. That will continue to be the same. So that's how fans and media. Mm-hmm. So, right, your perspective on player empowerment is, again, it's almost like the fans. It's great when it works in my favor.
Yep.
When the dude comes signs with my team. Obviously, for them it's a business, and so it's profit loss, right? And so I get that essentially when profits are good, player empowerment's awesome. When you're losing money, that it's not so great, right? I get that. And for a player, it makes sense too, because for them, they're the ones who are actually, in terms of dollars and cents, being impacted in the most literal way in their pocketbook. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're asking about the future of sport, like, I don't know that player empowerment is going to be like the end of, professional sports. If anything, it's just going to basically, it's going to cause professional sports to shift in some ways that I think that we can anticipate. Like, for instance, in basketball, one of the dynamics that always exists in basketball is you have a few teams that really win all the championships.
True.
Like the Lakers and Celtics have a ton of championships, right?
Yeah. Lakers, Celtics, Bulls.
Absolutely. So what used to occur, so this is where the Bulls are actually a little bit different, because what used to occur was the Lakers and Celtics historically just ran their franchise better than everyone else. Mm-hmm. Then the Bulls came along, and the Bulls kind of came in and were able to do that later, right, in the 90s, and late 90s in particular. What player empowerment will do is it'll make it so that it's a little less predictable in terms of who's going to win championships, because you don't know where the players will get together, right?
True.
But Miami was what until the players decided they were going to get together in Miami. Now, Shaq goes there, right?
Yep.
And that's player empowerment, because essentially Kobe forces Shaq out of L.A.,
yep.
Right? Wins the championship there. Then LeBron and D-Wade and Chris Bosh get together. Now, all of a sudden... So I do think that it'll shift the way that sports, the way we kind of look at it from a professional perspective, where there could be like real wholesale change, like sports that could be totally different because of player empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
College sports. And that's because the dynamic is totally different there. Players aren't paid.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden the money that's funneled in requires players to be paid, and now you have to look at how we're going to do that. And then we have to look at revenue-generating sports versus non-revenue-generating sports. We have to look at how that revenue is going to be divided out versus what goes back to the colleges and universities. Like, that could be wholesale shift, right, in terms of how we enjoy collegiate athletics.
True.
Professional athletic, it'll just shift. It'll shift which teams are good.
Yeah.
But the reality is we'll get used to it, just like we got used to a salary cap, just like we got used to free agency. It's just another thing, right? All of a sudden, we know what dead cap money is.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that was when I was 7 years old. You know what I mean? But I know what it is now because I'm a sports fan. I have to know. It's a part of the vernacular. It's a part of the lived experience and the reality.
So I agree. I think it's good for the teams that it benefits. Like it was great for Miami Heat. It was extremely great for them and their fans. But I also think it's very good for the networks. Like, a lot of people say, I have a buddy of mine that doesn't really like professional sports because he's like, the player empowerment movement kills professional sports. And I keep telling him, no, you just like people that don't get paid to play because you think they have some more love of the sport. He's like, yeah, that's what I think. Do you think those college players are not thinking of their money that's coming next? Stop it. So, but I think I think it actually helps the sport. I think it helps the sports. I think it helps the franchises that it involves. And let's be 100% honest, with revenue sharing in most leagues, it helps. The Lakers being good in the NBA and having LeBron James and Anthony Davis helps the lonely teams that aren't as good or drawing, like the Atlanta Hawks or the Charlotte Hornets, because they are bringing more money to that not to the franchise but to the sport. So when LeBron James comes in, they're going to sell out. Well, they won't know more, but they would have. They get the television contracts because they play so many games against so many other people. So I think in football, any sport, I think it helps because everybody likes to say we want to have parity in sport. There is no parity in sports. The only sports that there's parity in is the NFL. And in the last 20 years, there was no parity because it was Tom Brady and basically who he faced. But, I mean, if you go to the NBA, the 70s were the most franchises won. You were right. The Celtics, the Lakers, the Bulls of the 90s. You had the Celtics and Lakers in the 80s. And then you had, of course, the Lakers in the 2000s, the Spurs, Miami, whatever team LeBron's on. He's an old new dynasty of himself. But I think for people go, oh, it hurts slower teams. No, in my opinion, it still doesn't. If you're the Charlotte Hornets or if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars, which neither team has a lot of draw, you're still not getting free agents. Let's just not act like you are. You're not. But if you get that one, if you can draft that one guy, and then that one guy is good enough that other players want to come play with him, that helps your franchise and organization. It's back to what I was saying earlier is as an organization, if you can take care of that guy. Why did Giannis re-sign with Milwaukee? Because they took care of him. They let him know that we're going to do everything in our power to win. Patrick Mahomes had no problem signing a $500 million contract, but immediately after that, we re-signed Chris Jones. Again, he had somebody else that he knows that we're going to have players that want to come to us. Le'Veon Bell showed up. If you get that player as an organization, you now have to coddle the fuck out of him. You've got to do everything in your power to make sure that he is 100% happy, which you should have to when you have that type of guy. Like when you were dating a girl, which let's be 100% honest, these are just relationships. They're going on dates. When you first get with your girl, you do everything in her power to make her happy. Until you get that ring on her finger. Then you kind of slip a little bit, or until y'all been for a while. Even then, you're still making them happy. But for some odd reason, organizations don't treat it like that. I think player empowerment movement is so great for leagues, fans, and the sport, the franchises, just because of the fact that you have something to hope for. And that is the one thing that as fans we want. If we don't win, you got to give us hope. So I love that. I completely love it. Geremy, do you want to throw anything in there?
Yeah, you're 100% right. Player empowerment is hope.
Yeah. That's all it does. Like, you, as a Knicks fan, yes, it sucked when Melo got traded, but you were like, dude, if Melo wants to come, we got hope. And you were loving that. And in that first playoff series that you won, now after that, the organization just didn't do what it was supposed to do. But that's the issue. It gives hope to horrible franchises. It sucked when LeBron did not come to New York. But there were 6 teams. I remember the Clippers lined up, the Cavs lined up, the Heat lined up, the Knicks lined up, and I think there was another team that lined up. The Clippers ain't have no business being in that room, but it gave them hope. Kawhi Leonard coming to the Clippers gave them hope. Even though they're not winning, that organization went from second fiddle to we're not playing second fiddle. Player empowerment is so good as a fan as long as it's not leaving your team. If it's hurting your team, then it sucks. And I think we dwell on that. But if it hurts your team, it sucks. It's the worst thing in the world, and you don't want player empowerment movement. But if you have a team that sucks and you didn't get hurt by it and you can get better through it, oh, it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing in the NBA. And now we may even see it a little bit more in the NFL where you see older players signing on like AB, Rob Gronkowski, where they're signing on with teams, championship contenders. Le'Veon Bell came to the Chiefs for no money. Granted, he was still kind of getting paid for the Jets, but he came to the Chiefs for no money. Where you'll see these players that are going to come to their organizations because they have those stars. That is still part of player empowerment movement where you're ring chasing. Geremy, are you going to say anything?
trying to catch whatever Chaka said.
I don't know why you can't hear him.
Can't hear him.
I can hear him perfectly fine.
Can you hear my iPad playing YouTube?
I can. Well, you're like 7 seconds behind then.
Yeah, I'm way behind.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you think as a fan? Do you think it's good for sports, franchises, player empowerment? What do you think?
I mean, I think it's both good and bad. As a fan, like we were saying earlier, it's good if it's for you, or it's bad if it's against you. But from a player standpoint, I think it's good as long as they're getting what they want. But I mean, if they're cutting themselves short, then I don't know. Like the whole ring chasing, like I can understand it, but I don't get it.
What do you mean? You don't get like veteran players signing for less money to chase a ring?
Yeah, like I understand it, but I don't comprehend it, so to speak.
I just think that's basically because.
But you wouldn't do it.
Would you do it? If you were a player, Geremy, would you do it?
I mean, I'm gonna be whatever team is gonna take care of me. As a veteran player, look, I've already told you I'll sign on to be a water boy for fucking $30,000 a year, just for shits and giggles.
You know what? You saying that actually made me.
I've got to go to an organization that wants to take care of me. It's just like we met each other through my last job.
Yeah.
And it's just like that, that the organization, the company I work for didn't care about me. So why would I stay there? Let me go try to find another organization that cares about me. But you know me, my thinking is off the wall.
Yeah.
My thinking's retarded. Like, to put it lightly.
Yeah. It's a little out there.
I don't think like.
It's a little out there.
It's just.
It's not really that crazy.
Like me personally, if I were in this sport, I wouldn't care if I won a ring. I just want to be somewhere where I'm appreciated and my knowledge of the game is valued.
See, I think with you saying that, as fans outside of the game, I think that is another issue that we have with the player empowerment movement is we can't put ourselves in their shoes. Like, we can't say, because to us, no matter how much we love sports, they're getting paid to do something any one of us would get off the couch right now and go do for a lot less money than what they're getting paid for. Like, LeBron James, Patrick Mahomes is making $40 million. You can cut that to $1 million and let me just throw balls to Tyreek Hill and I'll be happy. I mean, I'll do it for free right now.
My arms don't go up high enough.
Yeah, I think that might have something to do with why like certain people get so mad about it, because we can't relate it to our situation. Like, again, what you said earlier, what I said, if we relate their $40 million contract to a little above average, whatever the salary is for your hourly wage or wherever you work at in your state, then you could kind of see that, oh no, I would leave in a heartbeat and I'm going to go where the money is. But because we see they make so much money, it's one of those things where we're just like, no, we care about the organization because we know they're going to be there, and they're not going to leave. But when the player leaves, we can't put ourselves in their situation thinking, and even if we just quit a job, we literally could have quit a job 2 weeks before LeBron left Cleveland to go to Miami, and we're still going to talk shit about him. I just think because of how much money they make and what they do, and us as fans would love to be in those shoes. Not technically their shoes, but to be where they are, gives us, some of us fans, a bad taste about player empowerment movement.
We're also fans. It's the relationship piece that we talked about earlier. So that's the thing, right? We don't have that. Well, I shouldn't say we, because I don't want to project onto anyone.
Sorry, don't forget, I'm 7 seconds
I don't. Oh, no worries. I don't know that in any organization I've worked for that I have the same level of love and passion and loyalty that I have for my sports teams. Like again, those sports teams have been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I don't remember not rooting for the Knicks. I don't remember not rooting for the Yankees. Like I don't remember these times, right? And so when you find an organization that you work for that you're that loyal to, then it's different. Then you would, I think that then might be a different level of being able to relate to someone leaving an organization. But the reality is that with your job, it's not like that. What we then have to say is, for these players, it's a job.
Exactly.
They weren't born rooting for Kansas City. The Chiefs drafted me, and now we got a relationship here. And when the relationship here ends, then I'm gonna go sign in Buffalo. I'm gonna go sign in Vegas, right? Because that's for them, it's professional, right? For them, it's a job. It's just hard for us to, as fans, remove the emotional ties and treat the players the way that we would want ourselves to be treated, and look at their situation and the relationship they have with the team the way that we look at the relationship we have with our job. Because, like you said, there's a lot of us that would do it for a lot less than what the players are doing it for. And frankly, it's monopoly money when you start talking hundreds of millions of dollars. Like that's the average person can't relate to these things. For them, it's not the same lived experience, which almost makes it unfair, by the way.
Yeah.
The way that we project some of our emotions and opinions onto the players. But we're fanatics.
Yep.
So we don't care about fair. We care about that laundry.
Yeah.
Right? There's a whole piece about, like, you can read about tribalism and how it leads to, like, gangs in South Central LA. Okay. There's a lot more correlation between that and our sports teams that sometimes we want to allow ourselves to believe. Just read the book Lord of the Flies. That's all that we are. All that we are adolescent boys who would rip Piggy's head off.
Yep.
But we do it in this way with our sports teams, right? Why do people fight in stadiums?
I was just about to say that.
It's illogical. You never met this person. You know what I mean? Like, these things happen because we have these emotional ties with these teams, and then it's hard for us to shift because the emotion blinds us to shift and look at situations objectively. We can't do it. It's hard to do anyway. Maybe some people can. I don't know that I always can.
Gotcha.
So I know that's why I get emotionally tied.
Yeah.
And why I get frustrated with player empowerment, you know?
Yep. No, I completely agree with you. That is a very, very good point on that. Like, we don't relate. Yeah, our love for them, and you're right. We are very similar to gangs. Like, I can tell you right now, there's been multiple times. Like, when the Raiders came, I hated the Raiders, and when they showed up here in Vegas, I literally said, okay, I'm gonna have to drop my hatred for the Raiders, or I'm going to be arrested a whole lot. Because that's just you knew it was gonna happen. Like, you know that's gonna happen. Yeah.
It happened when you started hanging out with me.
Yeah, that's true. I did drop the hatred for the Raiders. Yeah.
You realized that there was real fans that aren't stupid.
Yeah, that's true. Because if you living on the West Coast, meeting Raiders fans, sometimes like you can always tell a good Raiders fans, and you just go Jamarcus Russell. If they don't immediately start crying, then they're not a good Raiders fan. Yeah.
I knew Geremy would have a response. I didn't know what it was, but I knew something was coming. You can't just be throwing out Jamarcus. Like, you're trying to hurt somebody when you throw out Jamarcus. He's trying to get at your heart.
So overall, that's all I basically had on the player empowerment movement. I thought, is there anything else you want to say based off of it, Chaka?
The only piece that I would love to add is, again, for me, when I think of player empowerment, there's a whole nother level that comes with collegiate athletics that we weren't able to touch on here. That's another conversation for another time. There's also a whole nother level that we haven't touched on because we've really spoken about it from the really the professional side and the relationship side. But if you start thinking about the player empowerment pieces around social movements, Black Lives Matter, and even listen, I think that because the overwhelming majority of players in the NFL and the NBA are black, we tend to tie it to Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
But Tom Brady had a Make America Great Again hat in his locker, right? So there's all sorts of social movements.
The WNBA.
Player empowerment can be tied to as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we just haven't touched on
That's where I thought this conversation was going to go.
Well, at any point in time, Geremy, you could have chimed in, and put your 2 cents in and let us go that way. Just saying, your ass was the whole time sitting here like,
I thought the conversation was good. Like when you first texted me this morning, I was like, okay, let me get ready for this.
But then you didn't say anything. So, I mean, we can continue this next week. I'm down with that if we want to do a part 2 and go into collegiate and the social movement. Because, you keep mentioning, the NBA, the NFL, and I'm a huge WNBA fan. I love the Las Vegas Aces. And the women do not get enough credit at all about their social movement that they do. I mean, if you just look at the primary elections in Georgia, how they started wearing a different shirt, and out of nowhere, that guy got defeated. We can look at Megan. I know you're not going to like this. Megan Rapinoe, Geremy. And her social movement. And Sue Bird and Renee Montgomery, Maya Moore, who set out the season to help get some guy that was wrongly convicted off of death row. We haven't even touched on that part of the player movement at all. I didn't even think about that. I was thinking totally monetary value. And of course, collegiate is a totally different story because they need to pay those players. And that will shift the whole entire.
Which is interesting too. There's a dynamic there that we were touching on a little bit in this as we wrap up. But the difference between absolutely, but the difference between what player empowerment looks like from a social standpoint with men and with women, there's a whole nother dynamic.
Totally different, yeah.
The WNBA, those players deserve as much credit for what happened in Georgia Senate elections as anyone not named Stacey Abrams.
Yep.
Actually, we talked about this on our podcast, FN Sports. So folks are listening. There's some stuff in the past catalog that folks can definitely pull up, check out. We would love to steal a few listeners because we definitely talk about these things.
No problem.
Absolutely, I love to talk about these things anytime.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that right now we're at an hour and a half. I think that basically we might have to have a part 2 to this conversation for sure. I think that will definitely have to be up because you're 100% right. We didn't even think of the social movement. We barely touched on it, and we didn't even talk about what was it? The social movement and the collegiate movement. That's where I'm going with. Where that's a totally different in player empowerment when they're trying to get people paid and what they've done for that. So, I mean, we might have to have a part 2 to this sometime. We'll get together, see what happens.